Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It's time to continue our discussion on Spelljammer, D&D Adventures in Space. I've been going on over the various campaign settings for Dungeons & Dragons, starting of course with Spelljammer here, talking to you all about them so that you know what you need to know in order to use them in your D&D campaigns from AD&D on. Alright. Where we left off, we were talking about playing a bunch of races. Let's talk about some other character options you're going to have. Now, I am using information directly from the Spacefarer's Handbook, and I'm not going to go into huge amounts of details. But it provides a huge list of kits. Kits are something that's always optional that a DM allows the players to take. They're basically extra character options, changing around things for them. It gives them other weapon proficiencies, other non-weapon proficiencies. It affects their wealth, affects other various abilities, gives a description of what these various kits will be. Any other kind of special bonuses, equipment you might get, any other kind of skills that it might have to be this kit. These are good examples of various roles that might be filled out in space. That's the advantage of it, is rather if you're either using them, if you're using AD&D, or if you're using a different edition and attempting to adapt it to Spelljammer, it gives you an idea of things. For example, a background in 5th edition might be similar to one of these, and it would give you an idea as if you want to customize one of them into a background, or come up with an idea of various types of characters to play, regardless of the edition. It gives you an idea of these various types of roles that you might play in Spelljammer. Now let's talk about some of the role-playing more options, because they do talk about various important personalities that might exist within a spelljamming crew, within a member of the crew. Now this gives ideas on some special abilities for it, which are very rare, but it's more along the lines of information if you're role-playing this various personality or type of character. It gives this basic information and allows you to get an idea of playing this type of character set in this universe. So again, this is a stopping point, and it's not necessarily something you have to choose for your character. In AD&D, it's optional completely. And in this point in time, if we're talking about later editions, we're talking about using it as a template for building something you're working on. Again, if we're using 5th edition, the latest one, it gives you an idea of building those personality traits that you use for your normal character that's normally associated with your background. These would give them an idea of those parts of that background that your character might have. Now, also listed here is a number of other weapon proficiencies which are unique to Spelljammer for the types of weapons you're going to find, and a number of non-weapon proficiencies. Again, these translate to other things, and to various proficiencies in other editions. It could be for various tools or skills that might be necessary, easily translated between them or used in your games. Now let's talk about the logistics of a spelljamming ship. This is very important to know about, because spelljamming ships aren't just you get into a ship, you sit down in a helm, and you pilot. There's a lot more to it. You're going to need a crew in order for the ship to function properly and to move along. And a crew has a huge amount of requirements for it. I'm going to start going over a few of those requirements today. Let's start with one of the ones that takes up the largest amount of area, but tends to be in fact, least important. Food. Your characters need food to survive. Your crew needs food to survive. The bulk of your provisions that you're going to be getting for your crew is probably going to be food. This is going to assume that it's dry rations that your characters can survive on. A person can survive on 1 pound of food per day. They can go at about half food for a couple of weeks before they start feeling problems, and they can go without food for about a number of days equal to half their constitution score before they start feeling problems from that. After that amount of times without food, you have to start making constitution checks. If you fail the check, you lose 1 constitution and 1 strength. You're basically weakening. If either of these reaches 0, you're incapacitated. They recover at a rate of 2 strength and 1 constitution per day that you actually get this food back into your system, that you begin to recover from it. Now, this is also granted if you hit 0 with either of these scores, you permanently lose 1 from that score, because you were strained so much. And if your constitution hits 0, you have to make a death save. A save versus death, or you die from it. So you could starve to death very easily. Now, you're going to assume a ton of cargo will be about 2,400 pounds worth of food. This is 24 crewmates, 100 days of food for them. That means if I have 24 members of my crew, I have 100 days of food with 1 ton of cargo devoted to food. Most ships' pantries have about 3 days worth of food. About 1 ton worth, about that amount for whatever amount of crew it would have. So if it would be 24, it would be a ton. If it would be more than 24, it'd probably be more than that. But approximately 3 months worth of food, dry rations, is what's being kept here. Now, you can use perishable rations, with one or material that's more perishable. This takes about twice the space, and the only unfortunate side effect is it lasts for about a month. After a month, you're reduced to dry rations when traveling out in space because most of the other stuff is going to spoil by then. So you have about a month of dried meats and pickled vegetables and pickled things like that you can have slightly better meals, but eventually you're going to run out of that time and you're going to have to at least move on to dry rations for most of it. Now, when it comes to civilized ports, you can usually find the food materials you need in bulk from approximately 100 to 150 times what the normal price would be. On an uncivilized world, it's a lot harder. You have to go gather food supplies yourself, vegetables and food. And the fact is, at that point in time, that's non-perishable stuff. That's not going to last long. You're probably not going to have the setup to dry any kind of meats or dry out any kinds of fruits or vegetables. So you could gather provisions from an uncivilized world, but the amount of time it's going to last is very suspect. So effectively, wherever you're going to end up, you need enough dry rations to return from there. You might be able to supplement it from stopping by a planet, an uncivilized world along the way. Or you could get lucky and find civilization, but that's getting lucky. Now, water. Water is the second most important thing that your characters are going to have. It's more important than food. Now, most characters could last about 3 days, a week at most, without water. After 3 days, every 6 hours, you have to make a Constitution save, or you lose 1 strength and 1 Constitution. Now, this recovers at a rate of 1 strength and 1 Constitution per hour that you have actual water to drink. But the other advantage of this is you don't have permanent loss if you reach 0 for each of these from lack of water. Still the possibility of dying, but not permanent loss. So a character needs about a gallon of water a day. That's the amount of water your persons will need. So you have to supply that amount. A ton of cargo takes up about 2,500 gallons worth of water, oftentimes divided up into 50-gallon containers. Now, that costs a gold to purchase 50 gallons worth of water on most planets, or if you go to a place that has water, or a water world, you can usually fill up your water at any of these places. Most ships will carry about 3 months worth of water also on board them, depending on how long the trip is. Again, for both food and water, if the ship is going on a longer trip, it might eat up some of the cargo space with supply so it can last that long, especially if it assumes that wherever it's going to is going to take longer than coming back. It's going to take just as long as coming back. They might fill up on double, knowing that they'll have cargo replacing whatever they filled up with food and water on their way out back. Sort of use the return trip to make things worth it. Now, the most important thing your characters, your crew is going to have: air. You need air to breathe. There are a couple of ways you can refresh the air, because you're going to need to constantly breathe. You can only hold your breath for so long. It's like holding your breath underwater. It's not long at all. So you really need air. Havarti, they can refresh it. Enough of them, a few of them, casting fog cloud on a ship will refresh the air on it. That's the easiest way to do it. You could also stop by a planet that has air, either if it's an air world or just a world with air itself. But the problem with that is you have to enter into the atmosphere, and you have to worry about controlling your ship within the atmosphere and not crashing, and going against that sort of problem. So effectively, you have to dive in the atmosphere and hope for the best. If you are successful, great. If not, you might crash to get the air. Going back, because I forgot to note, if you're losing permanent strength or constitution because of lack of food, you can make a system shock check to avoid this, so it doesn't automatically happen. I forgot to mention that. Let me put that in here. Let's move back on to air, though, because there is one other way that you can get air back. Plants. For every 5x5 area of plants that you have on your ship, purifies air for a 5-ton ship. So if you had a 40-ton ship, you would have to have approximately 200 square feet of ship deck taken up by plants in order to have it be fine. That's a lot of deck space you have to fill up. It's 8 squares, if we're talking squares in more modern terms, are going to have to be filled with plants for a 40-ton vessel. Now, yeah, that's great. You have plants. This refreshes your air. Granted, there are some other advantages. One, they could be plants that produce food. Hey, there you got some extra food you're providing. Disadvantage, plants are very susceptible to traveling in space. They're weak. They can easily die. So your plants might mysteriously die for whatever reason along the way, and it's not very reliable, unfortunately, because of that. It's sort of reliable, but not always. Now, as long as you have at least half of the amount of plant matter you need, if you have above that, but not the full amount that you need, it reduces the air loss by 50%. So, yes, maybe if on my 40-ton ship I only have 100 square feet of area taken up by plants on my deck. Okay, that's not great, but that's enough to reduce my air consumption by half. Anything below that, it has no effect whatsoever. Now, if your ship should get fouled air or even deadly air, plants can recover it, especially out in space. You can recover using plants. Granted, it will take a month for double the normal square footage of plants to recover a fouled air, 2 months to recover deadly in an atmosphere. Again, this is assuming you're only using plants to recover the atmosphere. You're not able to go to some kind of planet and refresh it completely there. So that's it for today. I talked about a few more things. First off, I talked about the various kits you could use that help define different character aspects and different character archetypes that could be used out in space. I moved on to talking a little bit about personalities and, of course, proficiencies, both weapon and non-weapon proficiencies. All of these options are very optional in the AD&D system, but it also gives you a good idea of working points that you could use within a spelljamming system in other editions. So combining this information easily makes you help adapt your spelljamming games to other editions if you want to. I then moved on to the logistics of a spelljammer ship in space. I talked about the 3 main things any crew member you're going to have on a spelljamming ship is going to need: food, water, and air. I defined how much you need per day, how much you need per trip, how often you eat it up, what happens if you have less than you need, things like that. Recovering from lack of food or water, less on air, that's an entirely different system, which I will talk about more in the future. The entire air system of a spelljamming ship. Next time, I'll continue with some logistics and finish some more of them up. So any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please just leave it in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows for the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.